Have you ever stopped to think how an army could conquer and maintain an empire as vast and challenging as Rome's? The answer lies in logistics, but it's not just about carrying supplies or building roads. We're talking about a system so efficient and unbeatable that it made it possible to dominate distant lands, cross deserts, and win battles in almost impossible conditions. Now imagine if you were at the head of a Roman legion, with thousands of men dependent on your every decision. Every move, every step, every logistical strategy was a matter of life or death. And if you failed, the entire empire could collapse. But the Romans knew the secret. They had a plan, a communication network, and a power of organization that transformed everything into an unbeatable war machine. In this video, we'll reveal these secrets. We'll show you how Rome managed to keep its legions fed, equipped, and ready to conquer even the most remote corners of the empire. Want to know how? Get ready, because you're about to discover that Rome's true power lay not only in the strength of its legions, but in the logistics that sustained its victories. If you are afraid of failing in big challenges, if you have ever thought about how organization and strategy can be decisive, then this content is for you. Let's understand together how the Romans used logistics to ensure the survival and growth of an empire. And who knows how these lessons can be applied in your own world, where every decision matters. Stay with us and discover how to master the impossible. Check now if you are already registered so you don't miss these incredible revelations. Strategic warehouses, the secret behind the sustainment of the Roman legions. Imagine that you are a Roman soldier fighting on the vast borders of the empire, far from home, far from everything you know. The battle is coming, but how do you stay strong and focused for months or even years away from Rome? The secret is not only in your skill with the sword or in training, but in something much more essential: supplies. And to ensure that these resources reached you without fail, the Romans created a network of warehouses absolutely advanced for the time, known as aurea. But how did it work? And why were these warehouses so crucial to the success of the Roman Empire? Let's find out now. The Romans, known for their skill in organization and engineering, understood that without an efficient logistics system, no legion could win. During military campaigns, warehouses were the beating heart of operations, as they provided food, ammunition, and materials to keep troops active and motivated. These warehouses were not just ordinary depots. They were like small fortresses that ensured that the legions had what they needed to conquer, advance, and most importantly, survive. Have you ever imagined the immense amount of resources that would be needed to supply an army of thousands of men? In a time without modern means of transportation and communication, how did the Romans manage to ensure that their legions had enough to sustain months of combat? The answer lies in a meticulously planned network of aurea that spread throughout the Roman Empire, from the most remote regions to the busiest urban centers. Each aurea was not just a storage facility, but a strategic structure designed to meet the specific needs of each legion. This included everything from essential grains like wheat and barley to meat, wine, and even olive oil, essential items for sustaining the soldiers. But the storehouses didn't stop there. They also contained tools, clothing, campaign equipment, and even seeds for growing in the camps themselves. After all, the Romans were masters at adapting to their circumstances, and their storehouses reflected this. Interestingly, some of these storehouses were so well constructed that many of them have survived the centuries, and today we can visit them in places like Ostia, Antica, and Pompeii. This gives us a fascinating insight into the sophistication of the Roman logistics system. Can you imagine a system of transporting resources so effective that it would last for centuries and still have much of its structure intact? Now, think about the impact these storehouses had on the life of a Roman soldier. As a soldier, you knew that these storehouses were key to your survival. If a warehouse were destroyed or the supply chain were disrupted, an entire legion could succumb to starvation, disease, or even defeat. The importance of ensuring that these warehouses functioned without fail cannot be understated. The Romans also understood that they could not rely on just one supply point, so they spread these warehouses across several strategic regions, creating a safety net. That way, if one warehouse was raided or lost in battle, the legions could still rely on other sources of supplies. But the real genius lay in the ability to replenish these stocks quickly, thanks to an efficient transportation system that connected all of these points. For the Romans, ensuring that their soldiers did not run out of food or resources was a matter of life and death. Furthermore, each warehouse was closely linked to a larger supply plan. The Romans not only stored food, but also ensured that resources arrived at the right places at the right time. They used intelligence about enemy movements to predict needs and adjust supplies. It was almost like a logistical war in itself, where every strategic move on the battlefront was accompanied by a strategic movement of resources. This level of organization and efficiency was undoubtedly one of the reasons why the Roman Empire lasted so long and expanded so much. Did you know that even in times of peace, when the empire was relatively stable, these stores were maintained? The purpose was to ensure that at any time, when needed, a legion could be quickly mobilized to any point in the empire without worrying about running out of supplies. This showed the long-term vision of the Romans, who were always prepared for the unexpected. Now imagine the logistics of war in times of siege. The Romans not only relied on their aurea, but also had an extraordinary system of mobile storage. During sieges, for example, the legions could build their own temporary stores, efficiently set up to ensure that the troops had what they needed until the battle was won or the siege was broken. This required exceptional skill in engineering, planning, and resource management. Now that you know how meticulous the Romans were in ensuring that their legions were supplied, can you understand why the Roman Empire was so successful in its military campaigns? What do you think would have happened if the warehouses had failed in their purpose? Imagine an army without resources, without food, without equipment. Destruction would have been imminent. But while these warehouses were essential, the real question is, how did the Romans manage to keep such a vast supply network functioning, even in the most critical moments? We will find out in the next topic, where we will explore how Roman logistics went beyond the simple issue of storage and became a vital factor in the legion's victories. But first, I would like to know, have you ever heard of the importance of these structures before today? Leave your opinion in the comments. This will help us understand how fundamental these systems were in the most powerful empire in history. Medical logistics, how the Romans guaranteed survival on the battlefronts. Did you know that, behind the Roman victories on the most diverse battlefronts, there was a medical system so advanced that many of its concepts are still used today? On a battlefield, where the sound of swords and shields mingles with the clamor of combat, it is not only weapons that ensure the survival of soldiers. An often overlooked but essential aspect is the care of the wounded. Roman medical logistics not only treated wounded soldiers, but also ensured that the legion continued to operate efficiently, even after heavy losses. How? Let's find out. Imagine the scenario. You, a Roman soldier, are wounded during a battle. Chaos ensues on the battlefield, but there is a network of medical care already in place to save you. If you were in the hands of any other civilization, your fate would have been a slow and painful death. But not with the Romans. The Roman Empire had a field health system that was a true model of innovation, including medical units, mobile hospitals, and advanced methods of care, a structure that would have been considered revolutionary for its time. Roman medical logistics was one of the reasons why the empire was able to keep its forces so well supplied and so strong, even in times of war. Each Roman legion had at its disposal specialized medical units called medici. These units were staffed by highly trained military doctors, many of whom were enslaved people and, in other cases, prisoners of war. Even so, these doctors were a vital part of the legion, ensuring that soldiers received the care they needed to recover from injuries that, in other cultures, would have been fatal. In addition to the medical units, the Romans developed the valetudinaria, field hospitals set up directly on the battlefield. Unlike modern hospitals, these establishments were simple but functional. With improvised tents and first aid equipment, these mobile hospitals allowed the wounded to be treated quickly, reducing the mortality rate on the front lines. The design of these hospitals was strategic. The structures were designed to provide care for several soldiers at once, maximizing efficiency during periods of battle. Here comes the fascinating detail. It was not only the presence of doctors that made the difference, but also the way in which logistics were applied. The transportation of the wounded was also carefully planned. The legions had a medical evacuation system that involved the use of literas and carts, called carri, which were pulled by horses. The transport of the wounded was coordinated, often with doctors accompanying the evacuation to ensure that care was continuous and adequate until the soldier was finally treated. And what happened to the most seriously injured, those who required long-term medical care? The Roman Empire left no one behind. While recovering, soldiers who suffered permanent injuries were kept in specialized facilities where they continued to receive medical care. These in-house hospitals were part of a larger network of medical care that, in some cases, extended for several months or even years. For the empire, keeping its soldiers healthy was essential not only to the war, but to the maintenance of Roman power, since Roman warriors were essential to sustaining the greatness of the empire. Can you imagine the impact this would have on the morale of the troops? Knowing that if injured, they would be treated with the same precision and importance as a nobleman, soldiers felt more confident, more willing to face the enemy. Reliance on medical logistics was a powerful psychological tool, allowing the Romans to take bolder risks, conquer more lands, and advance even further in their military campaigns. This model of wartime healthcare was essential to maintaining high morale in times of pressure. One of the great curiosities is that for the Romans, hygiene was a priority. In many camps and field hospitals, cleaning the wounded and the soldiers themselves was essential. Infection in wounds was one of the greatest threats to life, so cleanliness and the use of sterile materials were central to care. Today, when we think of hygiene in a medical context, we associate the term with modern hospitals, but the Romans were already ahead of the curve in this area. Another Roman innovation was the use of herbal medicines, most of which were grown and distributed directly in the regions closest to the battlefields. Herbs were a natural treatment, and Roman doctors used them both to relieve pain and to treat infections, taking advantage of what nature had to offer. In some cases, surgical procedures were even performed directly on the battlefield in an attempt to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. But the most impressive thing about all this is that Roman medical logistics was not limited to the battlefield. When a legion moved to a new location or when a campaign ended, the medical units did not disappear. They followed the legion like a shadow, ready to treat the soldiers at any time, regardless of the conditions. Wounds were not treated only at the first visit. Care was extended until full recovery, with constant monitoring, ensuring that the soldiers were able to return to combat as soon as they were fit. Now, imagine if this system did not exist. How many battles would have been lost? How many legions would have been weakened to the point where they could not resume operations? The role of Roman medical logistics was fundamental to the perpetuation of an empire that lasted for centuries. And without this vital support, Roman history would have been very different. Foraging and rationing, the art of keeping legions fed on the frontiers of the empire. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to survive a Roman military campaign without knowing where to find food? In the vastness of the conquered territories, far from Italy, with the Roman forces surrounded by enemies and with the weight of distance preventing the constant transport of resources. What might have seemed like an impossible mission for many civilizations of the time became one of the greatest strengths of the Roman Empire. How did the Romans manage to feed their legions even in the most remote regions and during the most prolonged campaigns? The answer to this question is complex and involves an impressive combination of logistical planning, local resources, and a meticulously structured rationing system. Foraging, that is, the practice of searching for resources in the conquered territories themselves, was one of the most effective strategies used by the Romans to keep their troops well fed, even in adverse scenarios. When a Roman legion moved to a new territory, the first thing its commanders did was not organize attacks or advance towards the enemy. The priority was to ensure that the army had enough food resources to face the tough battle that would come. A legion could be made up of thousands of soldiers, and ensuring that everyone had enough to eat could be a monumental task. Foraging, then, became the solution to this need. But it was not just a matter of going out and looking for food. The Romans, with their administrative precision, systematized the process. When invading a region, the legion would establish a chain of command to coordinate the collection of resources. The practice involved everything from plundering farmland to collecting wood, water, and even slaughtering animals. What seemed like a simple hunt or pillage was in fact a meticulously organized logistical operation intended to ensure continuous supplies and maintain the morale of the troops. Foraging was not, however, a practice without risks. Often, the Roman legions were exposed to enemy attacks while carrying out these activities. Therefore, the ability to carry out this process quickly and effectively was essential. The Roman legions were well trained to identify local resources, work in a coordinated manner, and ensure that foraging was efficient and safe. When foraging was not possible or safe, the legions resorted to another essential method: rationing. You may wonder, how did the Romans manage to ensure food rationing in a scenario where supplies were limited and supply lines were becoming increasingly distant? The answer lies in the incredible logistical organization that the Romans developed over time. Each Roman legion had access to a supply depot, where food and other resources were stored in an organized and controlled manner. This depot, known as a horium, was the heart of a legion's logistics. With it, the Romans ensured that their troops had enough food to sustain prolonged campaigns. The Romans were masters at ensuring that each soldier had an adequate amount of food, even when resources were scarce. To this end, a well-structured rationing system was employed. Each Roman soldier received a daily ration of food, which included grains, dried meat, olive oil, vinegar, and of course the famous panis, bread. Bread was the basis of the Roman diet, and its presence on the battlefield was not only a matter of dietary necessity, but also of morale. The mere presence of bread symbolized that the troops were being well cared for and fed. Rationing was a crucial part of the Roman logistical plan, as military campaigns often lasted months or even years. The ability to control and distribute these resources fairly and efficiently made all the difference. For example, when a legion was forced to advance quickly with no time to forage, the distribution of previously stored rations became the key to ensuring the survival and strength of the troops. What is even more interesting is that, even in times of scarcity, the Romans found ways to adjust the rationing, distributing smaller portions while still maintaining the health and energy of the soldiers. Interestingly, the practice of Roman rationing also had a psychological side. Soldiers were well aware that during campaigns their rations could be reduced or increased, depending on the circumstances. This rationing system, however austere, helped maintain discipline. And for Roman commanders, it represented an effective check on troop morale. If a soldier knew he could count on food, even in difficult times, he would be more willing to follow orders and fight to the end. It is worth noting that the Romans were also very concerned about the quality of their food. Although food resources were often limited during campaigns, the diet of Roman soldiers was not as monotonous as many might think. Olive oil, vinegar, and even wine were used to season food, ensuring that the diet was a little more varied, which helped to keep spirits up on long journeys and campaigns. But what about when the Romans were unable to access local resources, such as in the case of prolonged sieges or hostile terrain? Here, the strength of the Roman infrastructure was once again evident. During sieges, when a legion surrounded an enemy city, food supplies became even more crucial. The Romans' solution to this type of challenge was to build fortifications and temporary warehouses capable of storing supplies for long periods. These structures could be erected in a matter of days and were essential to the survival of the legions during periods of siege. This did not mean that the Romans were immune to the challenges of foraging and rationing. In many situations, they had to make sacrifices or even make difficult decisions about who should receive the available food. But with the right planning, the Roman Empire was able to sustain its legions even in the most extreme conditions. Now imagine if you were in a similar situation, having to feed and ensure the survival of a troop in unknown lands with scarce resources. Would you be able to stay calm and coordinate a logistics operation as complex as this? How would you manage resources fairly and efficiently so that all members of your troop survive until the next victory? I want to know what you think in the comments. After all, the art of feeding an army goes far beyond simply providing food. In the next topic, we will discover how the Romans managed to carry all this, even in the most difficult situations. Stay tuned. The legacy of Roman logistics, how the empire sustained its legions on the borders of the known world. Imagine the following situation. You are in command of an army, with thousands of men under your command, and you need to cross a merciless desert to reach the battlefield. What would you do to ensure your soldiers survive and keep their morale intact? It would not just be a question of strength, but of strategic intelligence. Rome's greatness lay not only in its military prowess, but in the impressive logistical network that supported its legions, allowing them to conquer and maintain control of vast territories for centuries. Roman logistics was one of the keys to the empire's success. Every movement of the Roman legions was monitored by an invisible but immeasurably effective network that ensured that the soldiers were always well-fed, equipped, and prepared for combat. But how did Rome achieve this? What was the secret behind this empire, thousands of kilometers long, which crossed deserts, mountains, and rivers, with legions in constant movement, and still kept its troops supplied? First of all, it is important to understand that Roman logistics was not just about transporting food or equipment. It was a true administrative machine that involved the coordination of human, financial, material, and information resources. Let's start by analyzing the transportation system, the backbone of this gigantic network that connected Rome to its far reaches. Roman transportation, roads, ships, and the army of carriers. If you are a history buff, you may have heard of the famous Roman roads. They were not just an engineering marvel, were also a vital component of the empire's sustainability. Roman roads allowed legions to move quickly and efficiently from one region to another. They connected the great cities of Rome to the far reaches of the empire and were essential for the transportation of resources. A notable example of how Roman roads impacted the logistics of the empire can be seen in the Via Appia, one of the earliest and most famous Roman roads. This road connected Rome to Capua and later Brindisi in southeastern Italy, and was vital for military campaigns and the transport of goods. But what makes Roman roads so impressive? They were not just paved roads, but were designed to support the weight of legions and freight wagons, facilitating the rapid and safe transportation of essential supplies. Now consider the crucial role of Roman ships, which transported goods from all over the empire, from Egypt to the islands of the Aegean Sea. Roman fleets were not just for naval battles, but also for ensuring the flow of goods such as grain, olive oil and wine, which kept the legions fed and prepared for war. Water transport was a true revolution in the supply of resources to the empire, allowing Rome to keep its legions well supplied during prolonged campaigns. But transport was not just about the roads the Romans created, it was also about how they ensured that resources were properly stored and distributed. Enter the system of cursus publicus, the Roman postal service, which not only transported letters and messages, but also ensured the distribution of vital resources and information. This efficient communication system allowed Rome to control its territories with impressive speed, with information and supplies moving with speed and precision. Supply infrastructure, warehouses, fortifications and artillery. Rome would not be the empire we know today if it had relied solely on roads and ships. The empire knew that sustaining its forces in far-flung regions required more than just transportation. It needed to create structures that would ensure continuous supplies, even during sieges or in enemy territory. Each Roman army had its own warehouses, known as horea, where food was stored. These warehouses were veritable supply fortresses spread throughout the empire. When legions set out on campaigns in hostile or distant territory, the army always ensured that there were warehouses strategically positioned along the way. Strict control of these facilities prevented resources from falling into the wrong hands and ensured that supplies were delivered efficiently and fairly. The use of temporary fortifications was also a brilliant Roman tactic. During long sieges or extended campaigns, the Romans not only built defensive fortifications to protect themselves, but also created additional infrastructure, such as warehouses and even farmland, to ensure a continuous supply of food and resources. These constructions were not just a matter of defense, but a logistical strategy to sustain the legions for months and even years. The evolution of military logistics, engineers, and the architecture of war. Since the Roman legions faced enemies that were just as well prepared as they were, Rome needed to innovate to ensure their superiority. Roman engineers played a key role in this, creating weapons, fortifications, and even transportation and storage systems to ensure successful logistics. The Machiavelli, catapults, and siege towers were just some of the innovations created by Roman engineers to facilitate not only the attack, but also the logistics of war. They built bridges, viaducts, and fortifications in record time, adapting to any terrain and any combat situation. These innovations allowed Rome to expand into distant and challenging territories, keeping its legions fed, well-armed, and ready for battle. And Roman engineers also played a vital role in ensuring the survival of logistics during sieges, often in difficult-to-reach locations where troops could not be resupplied by road or water. Engineers designed creative solutions, such as ramps and makeshift bridges, to ensure supplies reached their troops. The enduring legacy of Roman logistics. What can we learn from all this? The Roman Empire would not be what it was without its impressive logistical infrastructure. The success of Roman legions in distant lands and on prolonged campaigns was possible because of Rome's ability to keep its forces supplied and well-equipped, regardless of geographical, political, or military challenges. Today, when we look at modern logistical challenges, whether transporting goods in times of crisis or managing resources in large military operations, we can see the influence of the Roman logistics system. The precision with which Rome managed its resources and coordinated its military operations is still studied and admired by strategists and historians around the world. And now, thinking about Rome's logistical innovations, have you ever wondered how these practices influence the way modern empires organize their forces? How do you think Roman logistics could be applied in today's world? I'd like to hear your opinion. Your vision is a fundamental part of our historical journey. See you there.